I recently received a call from my mother after 5 years of silence. She told me she needed my help because my sister and her husband had just suffered a tragedy. To provide some background, my sister's husband was originally my fiancé. I'll refer to my sister as Melissa, who had an affair with my fiancé, Lucas, a 29-year-old man, on the night of our engagement. Lucas and I had been dating since college, and after nearly 5 years, he proposed to me. He threw a surprise party for our engagement night, and I remember feeling on top of the world that evening. That changed when I decided to step out to the backyard to get a better cell signal and stumbled upon Melissa and Lucas passionately kissing. They didn't even notice me standing there in shock. I couldn't believe it. On our engagement night, he did this to me. When they finally saw me, they pulled apart, but it was too late. I fled to my car, drove off hastily, and checked into the nearest hotel. I was almost breathless, shocked by what I had seen. I was trying to process everything, hoping it wasn't real. However, I then received a text from Melissa apologizing but confessing she had fallen in love with Lucas and that their affair had been going on for a long time. As I sat in the hotel room, I broke down when Lucas sent a similar message, saying he proposed to me thinking it would push Melissa out of his mind, which clearly didn't work as it made him desire her more. He told me it wasn't about me but about them, and they were sure they were meant to be together. I was merely a stepping stone, a means for Lucas to ultimately be with Melissa. I stayed in the hotel for a few days, trying to regroup, still in shock, and trying to convince myself it was just a cruel joke of life. About 4 days later, I finally went home because I had to pack up my things and get back to work if I didn't want to get fired. When I got home, I found that my family had allowed Lucas to stay under the same roof, waiting for my return. It would have been touching if not for the circumstances of my departure. Everyone tried texting me to get a response, but I hadn't replied to any. So, when I did come back, it was quite chaotic, everyone hugging me, telling me they were glad to see me back. Even Melissa had the gall to approach me with tears in her eyes and give me a big hug. I was so stunned that I didn't even react, just stood there like a silent statue while everyone buzzed around me. Then, when everyone calmed down, I cleared my throat and announced that I was only back to grab my things and that I was moving out for good. Up until that point, Lucas had stood there, not saying a word. But when I said I was moving out, he announced that there was no need for me to leave because he had packed his bags to move in with Melissa, now that everything was out in the open. My family, including my parents, my aunt, and my father's youngest sister, who had been living in the same house since her husband died, all had bright smiles on their faces, as if there was anything amusing or sweet about the situation, at least from my perspective. Melissa stood next to Lucas, awkwardly hugging him, looking sadly at me but still smiling. I couldn't take it anymore and decided to ask my family what exactly they were smiling about, because from where I stood, Melissa had just ruined my engagement and stolen my boyfriend, and there was nothing funny or sweet here. That's when my mother stepped forward and spoke up, telling me they couldn't change the past but they could accept the future, which included Melissa and Lucas together. It was a relationship built on deceit, and they did feel sorry for that, but they also hoped I could understand and accept that this was for the best. Melissa said she was very sorry for taking my boyfriend, but she couldn't help falling for him. She wished she had told me sooner rather than having me find out this way, but evidently, they were deeply in love and hoped to spend their lives together. Then they kissed right in front of me, and my mother even had the audacity to wipe away a tear. I couldn't help but explode, telling them this was not a moment for sentimentality or emotion. What they did was despicable. To my surprise, my family seemed annoyed by my reaction, telling me I was being unreasonable and should be happy for my sister instead of opposing her. They didn't approve of my behavior. I was shocked at their attitude, told them all to leave my house immediately. I couldn't understand how they could defend Melissa and Lucas's actions and treat me as the villain, as if I was overreacting. My father interjected, saying I shouldn't act like a child because these things happen, and I should just accept it. He wished I would celebrate that my sister had finally found her soulmate instead of being jealous of her. They were completely irrational, and I couldn't stand it anymore, so I simply said screw it, went into my room, packed some more things, and left again without speaking to or hearing them out. Even as they called my name, telling me not to go, I really had nothing to say to them, as it was clear they cared more about Melissa's happiness than mine, right or wrong. They were so caught up in justifying Melissa's actions that they completely forgot I was a real person with real feelings. In the days that followed, my family tried to contact me multiple times, but I never responded because I didn't think I owed them anything. Weeks later, I even received a wedding invitation from Melissa and Lucas, which I, of course, declined. Friends of mine who were mutual with Lucas also declined the invitation in support of me, and even some relatives who knew the truth refused to interact with my family after they learned how they had treated me after the party. 5 years have passed, and I've almost completely cut ties with them. They occasionally try to re-enter my life by wishing me well on my birthday or the new year, but I always ignore them. I've never blocked them, though I did remove them from my follows and friends list, and because I have a public account, they can see my posts, which is exactly what I want. I want them to see and hopefully stew in their jealousy. It's petty, but it's the least I can do after how they treated me. Until recently, I barely knew what they'd been up to these past few years. 4 days ago, my mother called from a number I hadn't saved, and when I answered and realized it was her, I immediately tried to hang up, but she desperately pleaded for a chance to talk because apparently, they needed help. I agreed to talk for a few minutes, solely because she sounded so distraught, and my humanity wouldn't let me abandon her at that moment. She told me that Melissa and Lucas had started their own company a few years ago, but now the business was doing terribly, and all their investors were pulling out because they weren't making a profit. So they'd borrowed more money, but that hadn't helped their business, and now they were deep in debt, with creditors chasing after them. Everyone from their employees to their investors to the people they owed money was after them. My mother knew I was living a lavish life, capable of helping them, so she saw me as a last resort, begging me to lend them money to pay off their debts. And she wasn't asking for a small sum, she wanted me to give her nearly $75,000 to help Melissa and Lucas. I asked her why it wasn't Melissa coming to me directly for help, and why my mother was the one talking to me. So my mother told me that Melissa and Lucas didn't even know she was coming to me for help, as they had strictly told her not to contact me, and I guess we all remember what happened 5 years ago. Melissa didn't want me to know about this, nor did she want to accept my help, but my mother didn't know who else would have that much money and be willing to give it to them right away. Several months had already passed, and Melissa and Lucas were even struggling to maintain their basic living standards. My parents had done their best to help them, even Lucas's family was helping as much as they could, but it still wasn't enough, and they also needed to save money for the future, so they couldn't just give out their life savings, especially since most of my family and Lucas's parents were retired. This is why my mother had no choice but to call me for help. Now, I did have the means to help them, but I really didn't want to. It was right for Melissa not to contact me for help, they lost the right to ask me for anything the day they deceived me. I told my mother that I couldn't help them, and even if I could, I wouldn't. My mother sounded very upset, telling me I was being cruel and needed to think about my family. I told her that when Melissa and Lucas had their affair, and my family supported them, they didn't think about me, so now I didn't need to think about them. I've worked hard to get where I am today, and I'm not about to casually spend $75,000 on 2 people who are utterly undeserving. Then I hung up. Since then, my mother has been sending me several texts every hour, begging me to reconsider and think about my sister. She says this isn't the time for revenge, Melissa's trouble is very serious, and I will surely regret it if I don't help her now. She's acting crazy, and I don't know what to say to her because I also don't want to feel like the bad guy. Update 1. So, I finally blocked my family. I hadn't done it before because part of me hoped they would see my posts and be jealous of me, and part of me thought that if they fell on hard times, cutting them off completely might be something I'd regret. But now I don't care. I should have deleted them 5 years ago. I don't understand why I kept them around for so long. That was the petty part of me. Now, refusing to help my sister isn't about being petty, it's just the sensible thing to do. They've already wasted a lot of money, and I'm sure even if I gave them money now, they couldn't pay it back. $75,000 is a lot of money. I might be doing well financially, but that doesn't mean I can afford to throw around that much money without expecting something in return. Even if it was a close friend I was helping, I'd still expect them to pay me back. Here, these people aren't close to me, nor are they my loved ones, and I can't expect them to pay me back, so I have no reason to help them. It's that simple. I've also talked to a few of my friends about this, seeking their advice, and they all agree that my refusal to give money is the right thing, not out of a sense of revenge, but because it's utterly unrealistic and foolish to expect me to help them after what they did to me in the past. But anyway, I've now blocked my mother so she can no longer contact me to blame me, so I don't have to worry about anything anymore. Update 2. Hi everyone, something big happened today. I got a call from my neighbor while I was at work, telling me there was a couple outside my house shouting and demanding I come out to talk to them. My neighbor told me they looked quite frantic and had been yelling for about an hour, refusing to leave. I asked her to describe them, but I already knew who they were. Her description confirmed my guess, and I was sure that when I got home, I would be facing Melissa and Lucas. My neighbor told me I needed to come handle this because she didn't think these two meant well. I agreed. After all, we all know Melissa and Lucas wouldn't have good intentions. So I thanked her and immediately drove home, as I couldn't risk them getting into my house. About 15 minutes later, I arrived home just in time to catch them trying to pick my door lock to break into my house. I parked my car in front of my house, confronted them about what they were doing, and then immediately tried to call the police. But Lucas was quick as lightning, rushing over to knock my phone out of my hand. Melissa also approached and said they just wanted to talk, and they weren't asking for anything, at least not right now. I told them to make it quick, and said they shouldn't expect me to invite them inside, so whatever they had to say had to be sorted out in the yard. They seemed to accept that, which was a relief, because I really thought letting these two inside would be a bad idea. They already appeared quite hostile, so I didn't know what might happen. Since they said they weren't asking for anything, Melissa started speaking, telling me my mother had informed her about the phone call and how I had ignored the subsequent texts and even blocked them all. She told me that what I was doing was very unfair. After all, it had been 5 years, and I should have moved on by now. Instead, I was taking such foolish and dramatic actions just to get a bit of attention from my family. She said she was very offended that I refused to help them, and that's why she came to talk to me. She said she had managed to raise the funds for now but might need more in the future because this time she had raised the money by selling their house and all their jewelry, and obviously, she couldn't do that again. So she needed to know she could rely on me and turn to me when needed. I told her no, she absolutely could not do that, and she shouldn't expect anything from me under any circumstances, as I really despised her and her husband. I was so angry I even told her that I was very restrained not to hit her right now, so they better leave. Lucas had the audacity to say that unless I signed a document confirming I would provide funds when they needed it in the future, they wouldn't leave. I mean, even if I was forced to sign something under duress, it wouldn't be valid, and I'm pretty sure there are laws against that. And really, if they thought they could manipulate me into signing some document that way, then they were definitely crazy. I told both of them to get out. Melissa pushed me, saying I had to help them because I owed it to them. After all, we were family, and I couldn't just shirk my responsibilities. I was shocked that she actually pushed me, and I almost slapped her, but I controlled myself because if I became violent, things would only get worse. So, I decided to pick up my phone from the ground, quickly ran to my car, and drove away, not even bothering to look in the rearview mirror. When I left, I didn't turn off my engine, so I quickly got ahead. Clearly, they weren't foolish enough to chase me on foot, so they just waited outside my house, which was unfortunate. When I was safely away from them, I decided to call the police, tell them what happened, and then I drove back home, just in time before the police arrived. Within 20 minutes, I explained everything to them, and they arrested Melissa and Lucas, taking them away. I know the charges aren't very serious, and they'll be released soon, but it was still worth it, because at least they were taken away, and I didn't have to waste any more time with them. It's been a few hours since then, and I haven't received any messages from any family members, which is a bit weird, because I thought by now at least someone would try to contact me using another number, but they haven't. So I guess they're either fed up with everything and not planning to bother me anymore, or they're waiting for things to calm down before contacting me again. Update 3. Hi, it's been a week since my last update, and I really started to believe that my family wouldn't bother me anymore since I had the police arrest Melissa and Lucas. But I was wrong, even that couldn't stop them from disrupting my life again. This time it was my parents who came to my house, asking if they could talk for a while. This happened yesterday, and compared to Melissa and Lucas, they seemed less arrogant, so I let them in. My mother almost immediately started crying as soon as she walked in, telling me how sorry she was for ever supporting Melissa over me. My father told me that after finding out that Melissa and Lucas had been arrested for their actions, and that they had even pushed me, they couldn't look at them the same way anymore and decided to cut ties with them. My mother was crying throughout, and my father explained that they were sorry for supporting Melissa in the past when I was actually the victim. While I said I appreciated them finally realizing this, it was too late now, and things couldn't get better. I'm used to living my way now, and I didn't want to put my family before myself anymore. So although I appreciated their visit and their apologies, I really couldn't promise I would try to mend this relationship, because I really didn't think there was any point in trying to salvage a relationship that had been destroyed, even if it was with my parents. They were somewhat resistant, saying we could fix things if we wanted to, but that's just it, I didn't want to anymore. I just wanted to be alone, and that's what I told them. I respected their efforts, but I was ready. They looked a bit disappointed and eventually left, asking if I could at least unblock them so they could keep in touch. I unblocked my parents, which felt strange, but yeah, I guess that's all.